Ladies and gentlemen, I will call the Board of Examiners meeting to order. Can you hear us loud and clear in Las Vegas?
Yes, Governor.
All right, thank you. Attorney
Although
General is present. The Secretary of State is excused. We'll move on to agenda item number 2, which is public comment. Is there any member of the public present in Carson City that would like to make public comment to the board? I hear and see no one. Is there anyone present in Las Vegas that would like to make public comment?
I see no one, Governor.
Thank you. We'll move on to agenda item number 3, which is approval of the August 14, 2018 meeting minutes. Mr. Attorney General, have you had an opportunity to review the minutes, and are there any changes?
I have. I move to approve.
The Attorney General has moved to approve the minutes of the board from August 14, 2018. I second the motion. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That motion passes 2-0. We'll move on to agenda item number 4, which is a Victims of Crime fiscal year 2018 fourth quarter report and fiscal year 2019 first quarter recommendation. Mr. Nix, good morning.
Good morning, Governor and members of the board. Pursuant to NRS 217.260, the Board of Examiners is required to estimate the available revenue and anticipated cost claims for the state Victims of Crime program. This item includes a report on the claims paid in the fourth quarter of fiscal year 2018 and a recommendation to pay priority 1, 2, and 3 claims at 100% for the first quarter of fiscal year 2019. When this report was submitted, the program anticipated having a revenue at the end of the first quarter of fiscal year 2019 of approximately $9.3 million after covering all expenses and a 45-day operating reserve, which is an increase of approximately $2 million from the projected reserve of $7.3 million at the end of fourth quarter, but is down $2.4 million from the first quarter of fiscal year 2018 projected reserve of $11.7 million. The decrease is primarily due to the number of claims filed subsequent to the Route 91 Harvest Music Festival mass casualty event on October 1st. It appears the program has begun to stabilize since the October 1st event. Agency representatives still expect to obtain additional federal funding to offset the expenses associated with the October 1st event. At this time, the $9.3 million should be a reasonable reserve for the program.
Thank you, Mr. Nix. I have no questions. Mr. Attorney General, any questions?
I have no questions, Governor.
The chair will accept a motion to approve the Victims of Crime fiscal year 2018 fourth quarter report and fiscal year 2019 first quarter recommendation.
Move to approve.
Attorney General has moved to approve. I second the motion. Any question on the motion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That motion passes 2-0. We'll move on to agenda item number 5, which is a review and consideration of Victims of Crime appeals. Mr. Nix, please proceed.
NRS 217 regulates the compensation for certain victims of criminal acts. Victims apply to the program and a determination is made to whether or not the victim is entitled to compensation from the program. A victim whose claims are denied can appeal to a hearings officer to have their claims reconsidered. The victim or the clerk of the Board of Examiners may appeal the decision of the hearings officer to an appeals officer. Both the hearings officer and the appeals officer processes are under the jurisdiction of the Department of Administration. Upon the appeals officer's decision, NRS 217.117 subsection 3 allows the applicant or the clerk of the Board of Examiners to appeal the decision made by the appeals officer to the Board of Examiners. The Board of Examiners can render a decision in the case or hold a hearing on the matter. We have 2 items for consideration today. They are the review of a record of an appeals officer decision of appeals by applicants Saeed Kanglu and William Hinton. Mr. Kanglu and Mr. Hinton were notified of today's meeting. Within 15 days of today's hearing, the board shall render its decision on the case. The board may affirm, modify, or reverse the decision of the appeals officer, or it can decide to hold a hearing on the matter within 30 days, in which case it would consider the evidence provided by both the applicant and the Victims of Crime Program. Representatives from the Victims of Crime Program are available to answer any questions board members may have.
All right, thank you. I would ask if one of the representatives of the Victim of Crime Program would come to the table, please, if they're present.
Governor,
Yes.
I know our office had been working with the staff that we still haven't received all of the full record on this appeal. My understanding was we were going to get that supplemented in the coming weeks and push this to October. I know I haven't had a chance to review the full appeal record. I'm not sure if that didn't make it all the way to you.
Well, I've read the entire record for both cases. I do have a couple questions. I'm actually prepared to proceed. My understanding, at least with Mr. Kangarloo, and for purposes of the record, that's spelled Kangarlou, was unable to present any corroborating evidence associated with his medical bills, and his former roommate, who he had talked to, has moved out, and that person can't be found. But I guess for the benefit of the record and for the benefit of the audience, this is an individual who was on Las Vegas Boulevard the night of October 1 and heard the shots and was in fear for his life, began to run, ran into a pole. Some weeks later had another incident where it ran into a pole and injured his shoulder, but didn't seek medical assistance, and also didn't file a police report. Thereafter, he had another incident with regard to his shoulder. At the end of the month, he went and sought medical attention and was diagnosed with a rotator cuff injury, and subsequently sought assistance from the Victims of Crime Program. The Victims of Crime Program found that he was not a victim pursuant to statute because he was not attending the concert, and also found that he hadn't met his burden of proof because he didn't have any corroborating evidence. So I guess with regard to the Victims of Crime individuals, correct me if I'm wrong with regard to the rest of, at least a brief resuscitation of the record. My understanding is at the time of the hearing, those documents or corroborating evidence were requested but not produced. And it was my understanding that there weren't going to be any additional documents or evidence produced. So I guess that's my first question to Victims of Crime representatives. My second one is with regard to the payment of his medical bills associated with his injuries. Did he pay those bills out of pocket, or were those paid by Medicaid?
Good morning, Governor. Michelle Morgando, Coordinator, Victims of Crime Program. According to the appeals officer's last directive before rendering a decision, he did give Mr. Kangarloo an opportunity to submit additional information. That was not received within the 30-day period, and Appeals Officer Lychuk then issued his final decision in the matter which was appealed. And as far as his medical bills, I am unaware of who paid those bills, if in fact they were paid. We did not pay for them, though.
No, I understand you didn't pay him, but he went to the emergency room, I think at UMC. I have to look closer, but my recollection is that he went to UMC, so it was likely either not paid or paid by Medicaid, I would assume, with regard to the costs associated with his injury. So I guess the point I'm making here, it was a long-winded response with regard to what the Attorney General had to say, is I would just prefer to hear it today because I don't think it's likely that the record is going to be supplemented between now and next month.
Thank you, Governor.
Is that accurate? I mean, there's just been no communication that would indicate that Mr. Kangarloo was going to produce any additional testimony or documentation.
We have not heard anything from him since the decision was rendered, other than through the appeal process.
Okay, so here's how I'm looking at this. And Mr. Attorney General, if you want to defer this because you haven't read the record, I can do that. But essentially what I've stated is what we have before us. And let me tell you where I am on this, is that I think he was in pretty close proximity to where this happened. And I know that if I was on Las Vegas Boulevard and I heard shots fired from the top of the Mandalay, I would consider myself a victim and be in terror like he was and running. And so I think he fulfills the definition of a victim. With regard to the corroborating evidence, everything that he stated during his testimony and having read the record of his hearing, it's completely consistent with what he said at the time he sought medical assistance. And I would imagine that the burden of proof is by a preponderance of the evidence in this case, and I think that I would give him the benefit of the doubt and give him the 51-49 in this case. I mean, the other issue for me is essentially he's not going to benefit from this. If the Victims of Crime program is to pay, it's going to essentially reimburse Medicaid or reimburse UMC for the cost of the medical bills in this case. I don't think that Mr. Kangaroo has any incentive to mislead or lie in this case. He basically was in terror. The other fact in this case is that he's partially blind in one eye, and if he's in the dark and hearing shots and running for his life, I don't think it's out of the realm of possibilities that he would run into a pole and was in a state of shock and did not seek medical assistance at the time. So again, that's kind of how I view the case. Mr. Attorney General, if you want to wait until next month and consider the case again, I'm happy to do so. Happy to continue it.
Governor, if you're headed that direction, then I'm prepared to continue.
Okay. All right. Well, as I said, I'm prepared to vote to reverse the decision of the appeals officer in this case based on the record that I just stated. But if it's your wish, because there are only two of us, to continue this, then I will accept a motion to continue the case until next month.
No, I'm prepared to support overturning the decision and granting his request, Governor.
Oh, okay. And again, and I should have gone a little bit further. Do we know how much money is involved in this case? Then this is for the Victims of Crime representatives, what the medical bills were?
Governor, we do not know. Once we accept the claim, we'll get the medical bills and they'll be sent for any cost analysis and paid accordingly.
Okay. All right, then, Mr. Attorney General, if you're willing, I guess will you make the motion, please?
What's the language we need to do?
It would be a motion to overturn the appeals officer's ruling and grant the victim's request for compensation.
Okay, I make a motion to overturn the appeals officer's ruling and grant the victim's request for assistance from the Victims of Crime program.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Attorney General. I'll second the motion. Any question or discussion? And again, I'll just essentially adopt and incorporate my comment. This case, that we haven't supported a reversal in circumstances like this, but this case is different. And as I said, I'm persuaded by his testimony and the consistency of his testimony and the nature of the circumstances when he sustained his injury. So all in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
That motion passes 2-0. Let's move on to the second appeal, please. This is an appeal for Mr. Hinton. All right. So again, with regard to this case, Mr. Hinton's spouse was the victim of a crime several years ago, 2011, 2010, or 2009, was it?
Yes.
2009. And, and again, our prayers and thoughts are with him. His wife lost her life, and there were benefits that were paid at the time. Subsequently, Mr. Hinton has filed a supplemental request to pay for the funeral expenses associated with his wife's passing. The program has denied the claim for those funeral benefits because Mr. Hinton was not able to present any receipts associated with the funeral, and the funeral home where the funeral, the cremation was conducted is now out of business, so there's no way for him to obtain the bills. So, or the receipts in order to get reimbursed. And this is another one that I'm struggling with, frankly, because I don't think there's any dispute that he likely, or more than likely, incurred funeral expenses. And I guess my question for the VOCA representatives is this: is there a average amount that he could be reimbursed associated with the cost of the funeral expenses for his deceased wife?
This is Rebecca Salazar. Our funeral benefit is limited to $5,000. It's very hard to come up with an average because the arrangements that people make vary so widely. You can have a cremation for $1,000, or you can have a funeral for $15,000. So it's very difficult to estimate the amount that Mr. Hinton may have spent in 2009.
Yeah. And I'll ask for the benefit of your wisdom, Ms. Salazar. I mean, do you really question that he had some type of funeral expense?
No, definitely do not question that. Just being in, we want to be able to verify all of our expenses. We want to have documentation in order to be responsible and make payments properly.
No,
That's the issue.
and I agree with you. And this is one of those unique cases where, sometimes we have to think out of the box a little bit. And he just has no ability to obtain the receipts because the funeral home is gone out of business. And, God forbid that any of us have to go through this, but he obviously was grieving at the time, and his wife was the victim of a crime. There's no dispute over that, and I just don't think that it's, again, that he's seeking to defraud the state or the fund by any means. The question for me is what would be a reasonable amount for him to be reimbursed?
Mr. Hinton did supply a written estimation of what he thinks he spent. So we do have that in our record. I can't remember offhand how much it was. I'll try to find it here quickly. We decided not to use it because so many years had passed. We weren't sure how accurate the estimation was.
And as I said, Ms. Salazar, my issue, or the reason why I'm leaning towards benefits in this case is if he hadn't gone to your program previously and just showed up and wanted funeral expenses, that would have been one thing. But in this case, it's documented that he's previously received benefits from the program.
Yes. His written estimation is $3,436.
And again, my bad on this. Whereabouts in the record is that?
Let's see. It's more than halfway through. It's a written letter. It is right after our decision letter dated September 20th. It's right after that. I think we'll have to number these in the future.
So again, for the purposes of the record, this is a handwritten document that is stamped, received by VOCO, September 11, 2017. It states cremation was $775, storage of body was $450, autopsy report $45, death certificate $66, transportation of body $1,800, filing paperwork, basic service $175, and an obituary filing cost $125. So my question, Ms. Salazar, is if this were a receipt that was presented by Mr. Hinton, would you have paid all of these costs?
Yes, we would.
All right. And then finally, there is another issue in this case with regard to reimbursement associated with her earnings. but she wasn't employed at the time, again, in my recollection of the record, and that she was receiving Social Security benefits, which are not reimbursable, only employment or salary is reimbursable. So I agree with the appeals officer with regard to the denial of the claim associated with that. As I said, I don't have any suggestion in the record that any of this is unreasonable, and again, Mr. Hinton is seeking something that he wouldn't otherwise be entitled to, but he has been essentially a victim because his wife was taken away from him as a result of a crime. And then secondly, the funeral home is out of business and he's not able to get the reimbursement. So I guess my only other question, Ms. Salazar, is why did he wait the 6 or 7 years to seek the reimbursement?
We haven't had an answer to that question.
Well, why don't we do this? And I guess I'd like the benefit of the Attorney General's comments on this. I would like to know the answer to that question as to why he waited this long. That would help me, but again, I'm more inclined to grant the benefits in this case, but that's an important answer that I would like to know.
Governor, I would say that I'm prepared to make a motion to partially overturn the ruling as respects to simply the funeral reimbursement and grant the appeal on that. If that's something you would like to do today, and if you'd like to extend a month till we get that question answered, I'm fine with that as well.
Well, and thank you, Mr. Attorney General. And that answer may be a distinction without a difference. I mean, the bottom line is that he was more than likely, and again, in my mind, more than a preponderance of the evidence, out of pocket with regard to these expenses. So if you would, Mr. Attorney General, if you're willing to make a motion, if you would make that motion in the sum of $3,436 and consistent with the handwritten receipt that he had prepared that is part of the record.
I'm sorry, can I interrupt?
Yes.
There were 3 issues here. There was the funeral payment, the lost wages, survivor benefits, and the relocation, which we haven't discussed yet. So I just wanted to make sure we covered all the bases.
No, and Ms. Salazar, thank you. And with regard to the relocation, I agree with the decision of the appeals officers that the relocation expenses are always associated with a victim who may be victimized again and because of a threat from another individual. In this case, those facts don't exist. This was simply a relocation for him as a result of, as I said, the tragic loss of his wife. So yes, I would uphold the decision of the appeals officer in that regard as well.
Okay, I ask the board counsel to correct me if I think you know what I'm trying to accomplish here. So I move to reverse the appeal or the initial ruling on specifically the funeral home expenses and seek to grant the appeal for the $3,436. I would affirm the other 2 areas that were requested by the applicant and not seek to overturn those.
Attorney General has made the motion. I second the motion. Any questions or discussion? I hear none. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
That motion passes 2-0. Thank you, Ms. Salazar. You guys do a fabulous job. These were just different cases for me. Thank you. All right, Mr. Nix, let's move on to agenda item number 6, request to purchase state vehicles.
There are 2 requests for 9 vehicles on this agenda item. The first request is from the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources, Division of State Parks, to purchase 1 new vehicle. The vehicle being purchased is being accessed by the Department of Public Safety. The second request is from Fleet Services to procure 8 vehicles to provide to the agencies under the lease purchase program. The request includes 6 utility interceptors, 1 sedan, and 1 pickup. These vehicles were included in the agency's legislatively approved budgets. Representatives from the departments are available to answer any questions the board may have.
Thank you, Mr. Nix. I have no questions. Mr. Attorney General, any questions on agenda item number 6?
I have no questions. I move to approve agenda item number 6, request to purchase state vehicles.
Attorney General has moved to approve the request to purchase state vehicles as presented in agenda item number 6. I second the motion. Any question on the motion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That motion passes 2-0. Agenda item number 7, authorization to contract with a current and/or former state employee, Department of Corrections, Secretary of State, and Department of Transportation. Mr. Nix.
Item 7 includes 3 requests to contract with current and/or former employees pursuant to NRS 333.705, subsection 1. The first request is from the Department of Corrections to contract with 5 current employees to deliver packages to inmates through September of 2019. The deliveries will occur off hours. The second request is from the Secretary of State's office to contract with a former employee through Manpower Temporary Services on a part-time, as-needed basis to assist in the testing of the Uniform Commercial Code functionality in the new ESOS system. The employee retired in July of 2018. The third request is from the Department of Transportation to allow contracted vendors to use a former employee on projects awarded to the vendor. This request is for a principal to prepare final design and traffic analysis documents for the Centennial Bowl project. The employee retired in June of 2018. Representatives from the departments are available to answer any questions the board may have.
I have none. Mr. Attorney General, any questions with regard to agenda item number 7?
I have no questions. I move to approve agenda item number 7.
Attorney General has moved to approve the authorizations to contract with a current and/or former state employee as presented in agenda item number 7. I second the motion. Any questions? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
That motion passes 2-0. Let's move on to agenda item number 8, request for a recommendation of approval to the IFC for an allocation amount from the contingency account. Mr. Nix.
Item 8 has one request for a positive recommendation to the Interim Finance Committee pursuant to NRS 353.268 for an allocation from the General Fund Contingency Account. The contingency account has an approximate balance of $9.4 million to cover unanticipated costs for the remainder of the 2017-2019 biennium. The request is from the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources, Division of Water Resources, in the amount of $250,000 to fund channel clearance activities in fiscal year 2019. Representatives from the department are available to answer any questions the board may have.
Thank you, Mr. Nix. I have no questions. Mr. Attorney General, any questions with regard to agenda item number 8?
I have no questions. I move to approve agenda item number 8.
Thank you. The Attorney General has moved to approve the request for a recommendation of approval to the IFC for an allocation amount from the contingency account in the sum of $250,000. I second the motion. Any questions or discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
That motion passes 2-0. On to agenda item number 9, request for the allocation and disbursement of funds for salary adjustments. Mr. Nix.
Sections 4, 5, 6, and 7 of Assembly Bill 517 and Sections 2, 3, 4, and 5 of Senate Bill 368 from the 2017 legislative session appropriated salary adjustment funds to the Board of Examiners to cover the 3% cost of living adjustments effective on July 1st, 2017, which were not included in the agency salary budgets. An agency whose actual salaries exceed their budgeted amount due to the COLAs are allowed to request salary adjustment dollars from the Board of Examiners. This item requests access to those funds by the Department of Administration, Administrative Services Division in the amount of $2,108. Representatives from the department are available to answer any questions members may have.
Thank you, Mr. Nix. I have no questions. Mr. Attorney General, any questions?
I move to approve agenda item number 9.
Thank you. The Attorney General has moved to approve the request for the allocation and disbursement of funds for salary adjustments as presented in agenda item number 9. I second the motion. Any questions on the motion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
That motion passes 9-0, or 2-0, excuse me. Now we're on agenda item number 10, approval of proposed leases. Mr. Niggs.
There are 5 leases in agenda item number 10 for approval by the board this morning. Members have requested additional information on lease agenda item number 1 between the Department of Business and Industry, Division of Industrial Relations, and the Trust for Methodist Development of the First United Methodist Church of Carson City for the property located at 400 West King Street in Carson City.
All right, thank you. Is there someone from B&I here? Mr. Reynolds, good morning. Mr. Attorney General, did you ask for this one to be held out?
No, Governor.
Okay. All right. There was one question. The question was this, was the 3% increase each year. That seems a little steep, but I'm sure there's an explanation for that.
Thank you, Governor. Terry Reynolds, Deputy Director with the Department of Business and Industry, and to my left is Mr. Ray Ferraro. Ray is the new Division Administrator for the Department of Industrial Relations, so we're welcoming him today, his first day.
Congratulations. You got to make him answer all the questions.
So the lease amount, it does increase by 3%. The average over 5 years is $1.44. It is really less than our what the market rate is, which runs between $1.60 and $2 in that range. And so we felt it was reasonable. Yes, I would agree with you that it is kind of a steep increase per year. But if you look at it in the context of the overall, our leases within the area, it is probably in the neighborhood of about 20 cents less than what we pay per square foot.
All right, thank you. And again, I think just for purposes of the record, we just wanted to establish that it's less than the market rate.
Correct.
Okay. Mr. Farrar, anything you want to add?
Ray Fierro for the record. The only thing I want to add is just appreciative that I got the position as the administrator for DIR, and I agree with Mr. Reynolds on the rent.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Farrar. I just wanted to get you into the minutes, and so now you're in there. All right. I have no further questions with regard to this lease or any other items on agenda item number 10. Mr. Attorney General, any questions?
No questions. I move to approve agenda item number 10, approval of all proposed leases.
Attorney General has moved to approve the leases presented in agenda item number 10. I second the motion. Any questions on the motion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
That motion passes 2-0.
Thank you, Mr. Governor.
Thank you very much. And good luck, Ray. Agenda item number 11, approval of proposed contracts. Mr. Nix.
There are 33 contracts in agenda item 11 for approval by the board this morning. Members have requested additional information on the following. Contract number 3 between the Attorney General's Office, Victims of Domestic Violence, and the City of Las Vegas, Department of Public Safety. Contract number 4 between the Attorney General's Office, Victims of Domestic Violence, and the City of Henderson Police Department. Contract number 13 between the Department of Health and Human Services, Healthcare Financing and Policy Administration, and Healthy Nevada. Contract number 14 between the Department of Health and Human Services, Public and Behavioral Health, and National Jewish Health. Contract 26 between the Department of Public Safety, Central Repository for Nevada Records of Criminal History, and Western Identification Network Incorporated. And contract number 32 between the Department of Motor Vehicles, Verification of Insurance, and Datamatics Incorporated.
Thank you, Mr. Nix. We'll go to agenda items 3 and 4, the Attorney General's office. And good morning. If you would give a description of what's included within these contracts for 3 and 4.
Sure, thank you. Good morning, Governor and members of the board. I'm Nicole O'Banion, the Ombudsman for Domestic Violence at the Attorney General's office. And I have Christian Schonlau here, who is our Chief Financial Officer, if you have any questions, any financial questions on the item. The contracts before you today provide revenue to the Attorney General's office to pay for a portion of VINE, our Victim Information Notification Everyday system. VINE helps protect Nevada citizens from further victimization by notifying them of offender custody status changes in location, transitioning to parole, or exiting the system. These notifications are provided via text, email, or phone based on the victim's wishes. The services are available both in English and Spanish. In July 2017, the Office of the Attorney General took the initiative to be the first state to launch the enhanced VINE version. This enhancement to the program added links to regional service providers to help with crisis management, shelter, food, basic needs, counseling, and legal assistance for victims of domestic violence and sexual assault. With this enhancement, all victims of crime have greater access to resources even while the offender may not be under supervision. Per NRS 178.4715, a victim may request an administrator or the administrator's designee to notify them of an offender's discharge, conditional release, or escape from the custody of the administrator. Through these contracts, the VINE system has been implemented so that this notification process is an automated process, removing this task from the individual jurisdictions and creating a more expedient method of notifications. What this means for victims of domestic violence: they have timely knowledge, giving them back a bit of control in their lives for managing their personal safety. And it relieves the stress and frustration of navigating interagency bureaucracies to learn about their offender's status. For those whose offenders are not in custody, it gives them quick and easy access to critical services they may need. The Attorney General's office continues to advocate this service to the public, organizations, and agencies to ensure victims of crime have resources available to protect them from violent criminals throughout the state. We are happy to answer any questions you may have about this item.
No, thank you, and a fabulous program, and congratulations. Just a couple questions. So how does it work? So if I'm signed up, do I get a text with regard to this information? Or is it electronic communication? Is there an individual who contacts you as well?
What's really great is if they happen to be a victim of crime and do a police report, they are immediately connected with the system victim advocate located in those agencies, and that's part of their process, is to immediately get that person registered with VINE, and then they choose how they want to get the notifications. And then if they aren't filing a police report, that's why we're constantly advocating the awareness of the program to the general public. More and more people, the searches and the registrations are going up exponentially constantly as the program gets more out to the general public. People can go on either online through the website, or it's even been turned into a mobile app. So now it's really easy, accessible anywhere they are, down on their phone. It's a very benign kind of app, so it doesn't stand out. That's for the safety of the victim, so that it can kind of just blend in with the rest of their apps, and they're able to use it. There's an escape button on it, so that if they are in a situation where they're not safe anymore, they can just hit escape, and there's no trace of them ever being on that app on their phone.
No, that's really, really great. And do you have any idea of how many individuals are enrolled in the VINE program?
I believe it was 833,000 registrations.
833,000 victims?
Well, and it can be family members. We've had prosecutors go on and register if they feel a little iffy about a case they tried. So it really is accessible to anyone who feels that it would benefit them to be able to track someone.
No, and I just want to make it clear, that is great, but it makes me sad too,
Right.
that there are that many people that have to sign up for that. But again,
Right.
congratulations, and just a great way to be in the 21st century with regard to
Right.
notifications and making sure people, and particularly victims of violence and domestic violence, are protected.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. Mr. Attorney General, any questions or comments on these two contracts?
Thank you, Governor. I just have one question. So if you don't mind just giving us, I know you gave an update on kind of the genesis of the program, but if you could just give us an idea of how effective it's been over the last few years and how it's working. You know, I know you travel the state extensively, so just kind of your on the ground perspective of how this program's been working across the state.
Yeah, I know that it's been absolutely critical, not only for the victims, but for the jurisdictions also. It really helps us as a state make sure that people don't fall through the cracks. When the jurisdictions are overburdened with as many cases as they get, it is difficult to constantly stay on top of every single case and to make sure that the victims are getting notifications every time there's a change in the offender's status. So this has really relieved that burden on the state and really has allowed us to meet the Victims' Bill of Rights.
Thank you, and I just would love to take the opportunity to compliment Ms. O'Banion. We've obviously had a lot of great domestic violence ombudsmen for the state over the last many years, but you've been an absolute tour de force and taken on more things at one time than any of your predecessors. So thank you so much for all that great work.
Thank you, Attorney General.
Governor, I have no further questions.
All right, thank you. And again, I appreciate what you do.
Definitely. Thank you.
The next item is contract number 13 between DHHS and Healthy Nevada. Good morning.
Sorry, good morning. Valerie Hoffman, Chief IT Manager. The goal of the contract is to procure services to promote the meaningful use of authorized and secure sharing of electronic data, health and clinical data between healthcare providers, community health centers, hospitals, labs, imaging centers, emergency management services, and public health systems and registries. The project utilizes health information technology for economic and clinical health, the HITECH Act grant funds, which provide 90% federal match to state funding. The scope of the contract will provide secure data exchange connections between Healthy Nevada and at least 10 of our underserved facilities, rural hospitals, acute care centers, or skilled nursing facilities, as well as connect several of our public health, electronic health record systems, and the Division of Public and Behavioral Health Immunization Registry. Bottom line, what this does is...
Yeah, I was going to ask you, just how does it work in the real world? Yes, yeah.
It's going to go a long way to help provide a mechanism so that patients don't have to go to their separate providers, gather paper records, and carry them around with them. It will go a long way, hopefully, to reduce the amount of tests and images that they need to do, because the providers will have that information right there with them at the time to make that decision. I've kind of lived through this, so I'm very passionate about this opportunity.
No, and that's why I wanted to get to that part, is how it works in the real world and how it's going to benefit individuals. And
Yes.
so that they can spend more time getting better versus being frustrated in
Yes.
going to different providers and maybe not and a provider not having all the records that it needs in order to provide the
Yes.
service.
And as I said, I've lived through this, and it can be a decision of life and death between people at some points.
And do you have an example of that?
Yes. My oldest son had to have a liver transplant a few years ago. He went from being relatively healthy, and it's a childhood disease that we knew would eventually end up having that as the only option for treatment. He made a quick jump, and we needed to head over the hill to Stanford like in a day. So within a day, I had to run around to multiple providers, hospitals, gathering records. One hospital, there were so many images, they couldn't even get it in electronic format. They handed me a stack of x-rays I could barely carry, make it down to Stanford. They couldn't even read the x-rays. Long story short, when you get to that point of needing a liver transplant, it comes down to who's the best fit and what's the best information they have when they're making that decision of who gets it. And they kept asking me over and over about the different treatments that he'd had, the x-rays, the results of those, and they were missing that one piece. But long story short, he did get his liver transplant. He's almost 4 years out. October will be 4 years. He is thriving. He is a very successful IT engineer working in Reno and providing great things for the community. So,
Well, thank you. And it wasn't my intent to throw out a personal story, but that took a lot of courage to tell that story. And thank God that it's worked out the way it has. But the point I was making is that someone else now will be able to get all those documents and get it transferred electronically. And again, so a parent can focus on a son or daughter or a loved one or what have you. So I had called this out just because of its importance and what it means to individuals. So thank you very much.
thank you. And thank you for allowing me to tell the story.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And Mr. Attorney General, any questions on contract number 13?
No, Governor.
All right, thank you very much. The next contract is contract number 14. Jeff, if you would come up. I asked for this to be held. We did receive, we being each member, was supposed to have received a copy of this email. And there's an individual who had sent in an email with regard to this contract and had asked for a statement to be read into the record. I would imagine that you all have seen this, but for the benefit of the record, I'm going to read it in. My name is Leslie, L-E-S-L-I-E, Schwalbe, S-C-H-W-A-L-B-E, and I'm with Optum, O-P-T-U-M, a health services company dedicated to improving the health system for everyone. We were recently made aware of the State Purchasing Department's request and recommendation to grant a 4-year extension to National Jewish Health, contract number 20643 for tobacco cessation services. We've read the contract summary provided on the board's website and respectfully request that the board deny the request to extend the contract or provide additional funding to National Jewish Health. Instead, we ask the board to require the State Purchasing Department to competitively procure a vendor through a request for proposal for the Nevada Tobacco Quit Line services so that the citizens of Nevada can be assured that they are receiving the most up-to-date and value-driven solutions to help prevent disease and early death from tobacco use. And so again, that's sincerely Leslie Schwalbe or Schwalb. I'm not sure how you pronounce that, but I wanted to give purchasing an opportunity to respond and perhaps give us a little more background on this contract.
Thank you, Governor, for the opportunity, Mr. Attorney General. Jeff Haig for the record. So I think it's important to acknowledge that we have a guideline in the state administrative manual that says we like contracts with a 4-year term. It is a guideline, and we have the ability to extend beyond that 4-year term based on what we define as legitimate business decisions that are in the best interest of the state. I'll let the agency speak to the business benefits in more detail, but it was clear when the contract extension came to our to our office in state purchasing that the last 4 years of this relationship had been very successful. This vendor had demonstrated a lot of knowledge in this area. They had learned a lot about the state's needs as it relates to this. And there was significant benefit to the state by continuing this contract for an additional 4 years to allow us to build on what had been established in the first 4 years. And so that's why we granted the contract extension, and I'll allow Julie to go into more detail about the benefit to the agency in continuing that.
And Mr. Hague, before you do, and I'm not sure which one can answer this, but there's a reference that, so the citizens of Nevada can be assured that they are receiving the most up-to-date and value-driven solutions. So that, it's an implication that we aren't receiving that right now. So I suppose if you could talk a little bit about the performance, if there have been any issues, and if you feel like that we are receiving the most up-to-date and value-driven solutions associated with this vendor.
Good morning, Dr. Julie Kachiver, the Administrator of Public and Behavioral Health. And so one of the things, we actually participate in a 14-state collaboration with 14 other states and the CDC to actually combine funding for development dollars so that the state actually doesn't bear the full cost of system development. And so with our other 14 state partners, we do believe that we're getting a really good value for what we're providing. For example, they did a mobile device friendly website, our share of which was only $10,000, which would not have been the expense, but since it was shared. We also have been partnering with all of our provider network to create a referral system. For example, UMC contributed $60,000 to pay for their portion of the referral network. Those are not transferable to another provider, so all of that expense that ranged from $9,000 to $60,000 for all of our providers to connect would not transfer to another provider. They would have to reinvest that funding to go to another provider. So that would actually be a detriment to our provider network to try and this network that we've created over the last 4 years to reduce smoking and to increase tobacco cessation. It also, this collaboration strengthens our grant applications, which we receive a lot of federal funding for public health, so that was a concern as well. So we actually do feel that this provider is doing a very good job, and the providers have been very happy so far. They also, as part of our sustainability plan after the expansion of Medicaid, this became a reimbursable service, so this provider has become empaneled with all the managed care organizations, which isn't always the easiest thing to do. That would have to also start all over again. So we actually did feel like this 4-year extension was allowing us to get our money's worth out of what we invested in the first 4 years.
Thank you. You answered any questions I could have had. Mr. Attorney General, any questions on this contract?
Yes, I have a few questions. So this 14-state collaboration, are you saying they're all using National Jewish Health as a vendor?
That's correct.
Okay, and where are we as far as where they are today? If this contract were not approved today, for example, does this lapse tomorrow? Does it lapse next year? Would you mind telling me that?
It lapses September 30th of this year, 2018.
Okay, and is extending it for a year an option?
Yes, that would be an option.
Well, I mean, Governor, I'd obviously have to kick this back over to you, see if you have the same sentiment. I guess I would like to see if an analysis could be done. I know this letter came at the last second, and you guys have put up a good defense of why you initially went forward with the National Jewish Health, but I mean, I'd like there to be some time to see if there is a vendor or an opportunity that could provide better service, and perhaps that vendor is able to absorb startup costs, some of the things that you mentioned. So, I don't want to rock the boat too much here, but I'd be inclined to support a 1-year extension to make sure this thing doesn't in any way stop, but to at least give the department a chance to, I assume you guys didn't proactively go evaluate whether or not there was another vendor that could provide this service at lower or better, not only lower cost, but more efficiency. And maybe you can answer that question. But if that didn't proactively happen, I'd love for there to be an opportunity to at least explore it, and you may land exactly where you are today, which is no one can compete for the reasons you listed.
Julie Kachiver for the record. So we did look at other vendors. I mean, part of the selling point is this collaboration we have with the CDC, and the initial contract did come as a result of an RFP, so this is just an extension of something we did bid out.
But the question is this, so it's been 4 years since you did that RFP, and is there any reason, I mean, have you had any derogatory comments with regard to the service? Is there any indication that we aren't getting the best value, we being the state of Nevada?
No, we have not had any negative feedback from either providers or program staff.
And what do you know about Optum?
I'm more familiar with them as a pharmacy benefit manager. I'm not in the tobacco cessation area, so I don't know what product they specifically offer related to tobacco cessation, other than the actual medication as a result of cessation efforts, but I am not aware of them operating in the quitline area.
Well, Mr. Attorney General, again, there are only 2 of us, so I mean, I'm willing to support your motion for a year. I just assume approve it for the 4 because I haven't heard any testimony that would indicate that that the current vendor's not doing a good job, and in fact, it sounds like they're doing a good job, and we're getting the benefit of the value of a multi-state relationship. But again, to keep all things equal and keep this moving, I will support a motion to do this for a year, but this isn't extraordinary for us to be continuing a contract. This agenda is full of them. But again, I would be willing just to ensure that the service continues. If you want to do it for a year, I'll support that motion.
Okay, and I think that, I guess my general concern is just that there are so many technological advancements in the healthcare industry today. And I know as a state, separate from healthcare, we've tried the new technology route in a number of different areas. And sometimes, 4 years is a long time, I guess is what I'm saying. And there could be something out there that's newer or more exciting that's emerging that could compete. I have no reason to think that National Jewish Health is not doing a good job, and I know that's confirmed. But if it's okay with you, Governor, I mean, I do like the idea of at least the department having some flexibility in the coming year just to pursue whether there is a new technology. And, if we land in 9 months, this is the best one, great, we'll extend it out. Is that all right with you, Governor?
I suppose. I mean, it just is speculative. I mean, we don't know if there is another technology out there, and that's not to say that National Jewish Health isn't using the best technology that's available. As I said, this is kind of dancing on the head of a pin, so if you want to extend it for a year, I'm happy to support that motion, but I guess I would say that I would prefer that we do it for the 4 as requested, but to keep it moving, I'll support a motion for the 1.
Okay, I just have one follow-up. To the best of your knowledge, is this quit line that the 14-state collaboration is using, is that the best available technology in the country today?
Julie Kachiver for the record. I don't know that I could answer that at this moment because I don't know that I've done a full survey of every single quit line available. I know that the 14 partner states in the CDC, and including Nevada, have been happy with the service that we've been getting and have felt like the improvements that they have made, including a behavioral health protocol, of which our share was only $40,000 of the total cost, where we're really working on smoking cessation in behavioral health. we feel like that's been a good value and that we have certainly got our money's worth. But as far as being able to testify on the record that there is no other technology that could do it better, I don't know that I could say that.
Okay.
And
Well, then,
Mr.
Governor, if it's okay, then I would prefer we stuck with 1 year just to be able to answer that question, if that's okay with you.
Mr. Hague, did you have something you wanted to add?
Thank you, Governor. Thank you, Attorney General, for the comments and recommendation on this. I certainly appreciate the concerns. I think my concern about a 1-year extension would be just the disruption to the business needs and the participants of this program. And the business needs of the agency. I absolutely agree with the Attorney General's comments as doing our due diligence, understanding what the latest and greatest technology is available out there and to ensure that we're leveraging that here at the state. It's my opinion that we can do both. We could, if it was the pleasure of the board, approve the 4-year extension, and state purchasing can continue to support the agency in doing an industry forum to understand not only what Optum, but potentially others that responded initially in the RFP or that may have come to surface over the last 4 years, and just take a temperature of what's going on in this space and what technology is available and who the players are. Optum is a new player that's been identified today at this meeting that did not participate 4 years ago, and I think we can engage with them very thoughtfully, do a very purposeful assessment on what we may be missing or what we're not missing, and the contract provides us the latitude to make course corrections along the way if we need to.
Well, let's explore that just a little bit. Mr. Hague, when you say we can make course corrections, does that mean that we can seek an amendment if there was a newer technology that was identified?
So there's the ability to seek an amendment with the current provider. There's also the ability to shorten the initial 4-year term of the contract if we feel that we need to go back out to bid because we're missing something substantially. I don't sense that we are, but clearly Optum is a new player in this space that has not come forward to state purchasing or the agency to try to address these needs or to educate us as a state on how they could be benefiting this program. And so, to allow the division and this program to continue over the 4 years, I think is prudent, while still allowing us the time to do a brush up on this space, given the 4-year lapse and understanding who the players may be and what technology is available.
And one more question, because you said something important to me. I haven't reviewed the contract, but essentially there's a reopener that we could reopen the contract if there was another technology that wasn't being used by the vendor that we wanted.
Not necessarily a reopening. We would have to look at terminating the contract and recompeting it.
And what are the grounds? What are the terms for terminating a contract?
There's 4 different termination clauses in our standard form contract. We would have to do an assessment of which of those were most appropriate here. But again, I think that would come with the business decision, the assessment that we would make as to whether or not the state's needs are being met based on this current contract.
Okay, well, let's visit hypothetical land for a while. If it were a 4-year contract that were approved today, we're 9 months in, a year in, and Optum's right. There's better technology out there, and the current vendor can't access that, or it isn't available. Would we be able to terminate the contract?
If a determination was made that the state's needs weren't being met as a result of technology that was available, I think that is an argument that we would want to pursue.
Okay. All right, Mr. Attorney General, any other questions or comments?
No, Governor.
So do you still want to go with the 1 year?
I'm okay with supporting the agency's plan of approving the 4 years, as long as they're willing to just do what they said and take a look if there's other alternatives.
All right, well, let's do this. Why don't we'll approve it as written. If we could, if you could prepare a memo and do some research in the next month or so and then direct it to the attention of the members of the board, that would be great. And reach out to Ms. Schwalbe and see what it is that Optum might have that the current vendor does not.
We would be happy to do that.
Okay. Does that satisfy you, Mr. Attorney General?
Yes, Governor. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. The next contract is contract number 26, DPS and Western Identification Network. Director Wright, good morning.
Good morning, Governor and Attorney General. For the record, Jim Wright, Director of Department of Public Safety. With me today is Ms. Tammy Trio with our Records, Communications, and Compliance Division regarding the contract.
Good morning, Ms. Trio. Do you want to take us through it and what it does, please?
I'm used to the red buttons that we have to press over at IFC. Good morning. For the record, Tammy Trio. I am the ASO with Records, Communication, and Compliance. This contract is to extend our agreement with Western Identification Network. We call them WIN. This is a 501c3 nonprofit organization. It's made up of 8 Western states, and those states build they have a board that is defined of all those states. So all the members of the board are from those states. If you want to know the states, I can give those to you. I have all that. My boss, my administrator, Julie Butler, has prepared me very well. WIN is from those 8 states. They are administrators or management of our ABIS system, which is the Automated Biometric Information System. It's where all of our fingerprints, when we run fingerprints, they go through this system. WIN is our management group for the system with NECAM. It's NEC of America, and they are the company that WIN contracts with to do all of the IT stuff. So WIN is just our management group. NEC America is the company that has all of the IT information that houses the stuff. We are asking for a contract extension, and it does probably look a little bit long for WIN, but those 8 states that we have all collaborate with the funding for WIN, who then pushes all of the funding to NEC to pay for the system. The reason why we need to go out, in order to have evergreen, lifelong sustainability of this system, we want to keep third-party software components evergreen and provide additional biometric identification functionality in line with the FBI's Next Generation Identification, or NGI, and provide active disaster recovery capabilities. NEC, when they went out to RFP, NEC stated that in order for us to be ABIS, which is the automated biometric, instead of AFIS, automated fingerprint information system, we're getting better. They needed to get new equipment, and they needed to make sure those third-party contracts were in place, so we had to go out farther with our contract. And that's about it in a nutshell.
Okay, no, that's a lot.
I have 2 pages of stuff. I mean, if I'm ready for some questions, if you have questions on specifics. So.
Well, and I had asked for this contract to be held out because it's a 10-year contract. Yes. And you know, I'm pretty certain I know the answers, but I just want to ask them anyway. You've talked about why it has to be 10 years. You spoke of the evergreen, which provides me some comfort that as time moves on, that the system will stay up with any type of technological improvements and will be as contemporary as possible. Is that all accurate?
Yes, and if I can add for the record that the WIN and the Board of Directors, they did go out and hired a contractor, MTG Management, to actually do a cost-benefit analysis. And it was more prudent for us to continue this than to go out and everyone individually, each of those states individually, get their own system. it's a lot more expensive. We have numbers that are, it's about 8 to 15 million per state to do that individually instead of combined. Having it combined gives us access to all those western states, fingerprint the information. So we have a bigger networking group and easy access. It helps with public safety and our officers on the streets.
Well said.
Thank
And
you.
I didn't mean there would be a dramatic pause there. I wanted to ask Director Wright to say a few things, but before I go to Director Wright, Mr. Attorney General, did you have any questions for Ms. Trio?
No, Governor, thank you.
Okay. Director Wright, is there anything you wanted to add? I suppose what I'm looking from you is just how we're doing with regard to the entire system.
Thank you, Governor. For the record, Jim Wright, Department of Public Safety. This is an ever-changing dynamic system. We are in the process of upgrading our Insidious system. We're going through the budget processes for that and that. This is one critical element to that system. And, again, the identification of folks is very vital for us in the jobs that we do. And, as the improvements come out, the system gets better, the work that we can do gets better on the identification side of things. So we certainly appreciate your support on this, and, we strive to have the best criminal justice system that we can here in the state, because it's truly important to all of us, and specifically to public safety and who we serve.
Thank you, Director Wright. I really appreciate your testimony. Mr. Attorney General, any questions on Contract 26?
No, Governor, thank you.
Thank you very much. The final is Contract 32 between DMV and Datamatics. And good morning.
Good morning, Governor, Mr. Attorney General. For the record, Sean McDonald, Administrator for the Central Services and Records Division. To begin with, this contract handles quite a few mailings. We're somewhere in the neighborhood between 635,000 to 640,000 pieces per year. So a little bit of background. The U.S. Postal Service postage and certified fees account for roughly 86% of the total costs encumbered in this contract. So if you look at that respectively, somewhere between 1.3 million to 1.4 annually. Certified mailings are a requirement set forth in statute because the action is taking some sort of an action. Those actions encompass the areas of vehicle insurance, driver licensing, and revenue recovery. A well-performing vendor who is efficiently and timely, Datamatics, was onboarded by the DMV in October of 2014. This, of course, is the first amendment to the original contract, adding an additional 6 years. So this contract will cover a total of period of 10 years, ending September 30th, 2024. Each of these mailings is tied to a time element pursuant to a statutory requirement. A digital copy of each mailing is retained by Datamatics as a matter of legal record. So state mail services have told the department they are unable to perform the duties as required, and this is outlined in the contract summary, question number 8. We receive a volume discounted rate as mailings are performed in mass through Datamatics via the USPS clearinghouse. And of course, cardstock and or paper used, ink, black and white versus color, word count, envelope size and type, quantity of pages produced, they all factor as well, of course, for the materials costs. And of course, following the demographer's growth rate, we anticipate a 1.4 growth each year over the next 4 years. And I think it's important to note that we have over 300 different letters, different styles of letters, notifications, postcards, certified, regular, that are processed through the Datamatics account. And we've spent, of course, the first couple of years fine-tuning those down. They worked with us very well. And basically, we've got a really good running system now. They're very easy to work with. They're very sensitive to our needs. When we contact them, they're quick to respond. And so the relationship has been strong, and it's working. So as a result, that's why we're looking for the extension that we have.
Thank you, Mr. McDonald. You were listening very well with the other contracts that were here, because it seems like that's a theme today with regard to these extensions, particularly the ones associated with important technology. And so, and the performance of the vendor. And you said this is a well-performing vendor that is using state-of-the-art equipment, state-of-the-art technology. Are you confident that they will continue to do so? I imagine there aren't a lot of other vendors in this space, but are you confident that they will continue to use the best technology available, and does the contract allow you to demand that?
It does, and I am very confident with their performance. And to answer your first question, yes, there are very few that can handle this kind of volume and the variety and the multitude of different mailings that we have. It's one thing to do bulk mailings, but it's another to do it in so many different ways. And then on top of it, because of the volumes that they do with other contracts, they're able to put us in there as well. So we recognize a little bit of a savings on the postage side of it. Again, even though it's 86% of that $9 million, we're able to realize benefits from the mass volumes.
Thank you very much. Mr. Attorney General, any questions on this contract?
No, Governor, thanks.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, that completes the list of contracts that I had to be held out. Mr. Attorney General, any other questions on any other contract?
Had you on mute, sorry. No, Governor, I move to approve agenda item number 11.
The Attorney General has moved to approve contracts 1 through 33 as presented in agenda item number 11. I second the motion. Any questions on the motion? Hear none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
That motion passes 2-0. Let's move on to approval of proposed MSAs. Mr. Nix.
There are 281 master service agreements in agenda item 12 for approval by the board this morning. Most of these agreements replace existing provider agreements as explained at the June BOE meeting. No additional information has been requested by any of the members.
Thank you, Mr. Nix. I have no questions. We have a whole binder full of agreements, but I can't say that I looked at all of them, but I looked at the representative ones, and very well done. So if there are no further questions, the chair will accept a motion to approve the MSAs as presented in agenda item number 12.
Move to approve.
Attorney General has moved for approval. I second the motion. Any questions on the motion? There are none. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
That motion passes 2-0. On to agenda item 13, Clerk of the Board contracts. Mr. Nix.
There were 35 contracts under the 50,000 threshold approved by the clerk between July 24th, 2018 and August 20th, 2018. This item is informational only, and no additional information has been requested by any of the members.
I have no questions. Mr. Attorney General, any questions on agenda item number 13?
I have no questions. Thank you, Governor.
Thank you. Agenda item 14, reports. Mr. Nix.
There are 4 information reports under this agenda item. The first report is on overtime and accrued compensatory leave for the 4th quarter of fiscal year 2018. My staff summarized the report into a 2-page summary, so I will not read the details, but I'll hit a couple of highlights. For fiscal year 2018, overtime pay and comp leave accounted for a total of approximately $46.27 million, or 4.5% of total pay, a 1.2% decrease from fiscal year 2017. The Department of Health and Human Services had the highest amount of overtime and comp time at $2.42 million, or 3.12% of their base pay for the 4th quarter, followed by the Department of Public Safety at $2.13 million, or 8.98% of base pay. Those 2 agencies accounted for 52.9% of the overtime for the quarter. For fiscal year 2018, the Department of Corrections has incurred $14.4 million in overtime and comp time, or 9.24% of base pay, while DHHS has incurred $11.03 million of overtime and comp time, or 3.79% of base pay. Those two agencies account for 55% of the overtime and comp time for fiscal year 2018. At the Department of Corrections, overtime and comp time at the 7 locations on page 2 accounted for 71.9% of the total overtime for the department. By event code, the highest 4 causes on page 2 accounted for 72.8% of the overtime at the Department of Corrections for fourth quarter fiscal year 2018. At the Department of Health and Human Services, the 4 event codes on the bottom of page 2 accounted for 68.7% of their overtime. Looking at the first quarter of 2019 for these 2 departments and through 5 of 7 pay periods for the quarter, the Department of Corrections has incurred $1.75 million in overtime and comp time, while DHHS has incurred $1.88 million.
Thank you. But at least with regard to corrections, it's a great improvement. And so I know we have representatives from the Department of Corrections here, so I want to make sure that that was noted. And I know that overtime is somewhat inevitable, but it's a dramatic improvement over what was occurring before. So thank you very much for that. All right, Mr. Attorney General, any questions with regard to agenda item number 14?
No, Governor. Thank you.
All right, we'll move on to agenda item number 15. Oh, 3 more. Whoops. I'm in a little bit of a hurry. Why don't you go with those? Sorry, Mr. Nix. Please proceed.
The second is an informational report regarding lands or interests in lands transferred, sold, exchanged, or leased under the Tahoe Basin Act program, as well as a quarterly report on the status of real property or interest in real property transferred under the Lake Tahoe Mitigation Program, which are required pursuant to NRS 321.5954 and Chapter 355, Statutes of Nevada, 1993, respectively. This report is for the quarter ending June 30th, 2018. There was 1 transaction under the Tahoe Basin Act consisting of a 0.46 acre donation in Incline Village that will be managed as open space. There were 6 transactions under the Lake Tahoe Mitigation Program, resulting in the sale of 3,832 square feet of land coverage, resulting in proceeds of $81,431 for the Nevada Land Bank. The third report describes the uses of the Complete Streets funds by the 4 recipient counties as requested by the board at the November 2015 meeting. And the fourth report is from the Department of Motor Vehicles on the voluntary contributions collected by county pursuant to NRS 482.480, the Complete Streets program, for the period from April 1st, 2018 to June 30th, 2018. During the quarter ending June 30th, the department collected $89,642 compared to $80,033 in the same period last year, and $87,815 collected last quarter. For the year, the department collected $336,129, a 2.3% increase from the prior year. Of the amount collected, approximately 78.07% was from Clark County, 16.02% was from Washoe County, just over 3% was from Carson City, and just under 3% was from Douglas County, who started participating in late fiscal year 2016. After deducting 1% to administer the collection and distribution of contributions, the department distributed $332,768 to the 4 counties for fiscal year 2018, compared to $325,283 in fiscal year 2017. Approximately 13.9% of those registering a vehicle during the fiscal year contributed to the Complete Streets program, ranging from 10.38% in Douglas County to 15.01% in Clark County. This is a decrease from 14.3% who contributed in fiscal year 2017.
All right, thank you, Mr. Nix. Any questions, Mr. Attorney General, on?
No, Governor. Thank you.
14. All right, we'll move to public comment. Before I ask for public comment from Carson City, I just wanted to remind everybody that today is the anniversary of of 9/11, the 17th anniversary. It's also Patriots Day and a National Day of Service, so respectfully ask if someone would take a private moment perhaps now and think about the victims of 9/11 and provide some thanks for our first responders, law enforcement, firefighters, medical providers, everyone else who's associated with our military keeping us safe. Thank you very much. All right, any public comment from Carson City? I hear and see none. Any public comment from Las Vegas?
None here, Governor.
All right, thank you. Is there a motion to adjourn, Mr. Attorney General?
Move to adjourn.
Attorney General has moved to adjourn. I second the motion. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
That motion passes 2-0. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. This meeting is adjourned.